This is Steve Wells.
And I'm Jeffrey Feldberg. Welcome to the Sell My Business podcast.
This podcast is brought to you by Deep Wealth. Are you a business owner who is wondering how to either grow your business, sell it, or both? Or maybe in today's environment, you're wondering how to make your business pandemic-proof. Visit deepwealth.com to find out how you can master the strategies to grow and extract the deep wealth from your business. Visit www.deepwealth.com.
Welcome to episode 19 of the Sell My Business podcast. This episode is a solo run with me, as Steve Wells continues to enjoy his much-deserved time off. Today's guest is a treasure chest of information, wisdom, and insights. Rolando Gadala-Maria is founder and CEO of Visage Capital Group. Rolando has more than 35 years of experience as a serial entrepreneur and brings a unique set of skills that include founding new businesses, investing and restructuring existing businesses, mergers and acquisitions, business strategy, and business growth models. Rolando and his team created a proprietary, deep analytical process that identifies perception of value from different buyers and sectors. Rolando helps clients maximize their exit value through preparing these companies to have the right positioning and alignment. The end result is that Rolando never sells a company until its value is maximized for shareholders and optimized for the buyer. Rolando's deep conviction is when the homework is done, extra value is always added. Rolando, wonderful to have you with us today. Very excited about the interview that we're about to have. But why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Thank you, Jeffrey. Glad to be here. I started as a serial entrepreneur. I graduated from college in the US. I'm originally from El Salvador, Central America, but I lived in Miami for many, many years. And when I graduated from college, I decided that I needed to be an entrepreneur. So I went back to El Salvador. I founded my first business, and 4 years later, I just got an offer to buy it, and I sold it. And then at that time, I thought I had gotten a good price. But after learning other stories from other friends, I realized that I could have potentially got much better price than I did. So I said, I'm going to found a new company. 3 years later, I had a competitor from another country trying to buy it. And I said, no, our plans is to keep on growing very aggressively. And that attracted a couple more buyers into the table. And I ended up selling it for 3 times the value in comparison to multiples of the first company. So I said, there's something interesting here. And then I started a consulting company that evolved into helping businesses to grow and helping them after 2-3 years to an exit.
That's wonderful. Before we get going, your company name isn't just any company name. There's a story behind that.
Sure, absolutely. Several years ago, I wrote a leadership program. It's called Awaken Leaders. And the whole purpose of the program was to expand consciousness to higher levels. I believe we have the capacity as human beings to discover many things in life. I mean discover because they are just simply covered. And when we take that cover away, we discover things. And that's when we have the wow moments and the eye-openers on many aspects in life, including business. So I put that philosophy into the core of my company. And when I was creating the name, I said, this has to be completely aligned with what I believe. And some of the essential factors that has to be there is the capacity to have a very clear vision of what you have to achieve. And so I came up with this word that I derived from the old French visage. As you know, visage in French means face. But the origins of that word in the old French means the capacity to visualize so you're able to manifest.
It's wonderful. And so Visage Capital Group is your company name. Rolando, What's interesting, you've been on both sides of the table. So you're a serial entrepreneur. You had businesses, you built businesses, grew them, you sold them. And now you're on the other side of the table where you're helping other business owners take their business and help them realize their dream when they exit that business and they sell it. Having been on both sides of the table, if you could go back to your younger self when you were building your business, what would you tell yourself before you sold it, what you know now that you would have done differently? when you went to sell?
I think one thing that is very important that I missed on the first two exits is to take a very deep dive into my company, try to understand the true potential it has, try to position it in a way that is highly appealing to potential buyers. And not only in my sector, but also in parallel sector, that the company could have much more value than just for somebody in the same industry.
Rolando, you bring up a terrific point, and I know offline we were talking about this. When I speak to business owners and you're speaking to business owners, everyone thinks that they know why a buyer is going to buy their company and what they're going to do with that company. But in many ways, that's a mistake because you never know why a buyer is buying a company and the value that they're going to place on that. So to the business owners that are out there that are saying, yeah, maybe my competitor is going to buy me, or I know why this potential buyer is interested in my company, why should they stop that line of thinking?
Yes. One of the basic principles that we apply, Jeffrey, is that nobody knows their companies as the owners themselves. That's a rule of law that we apply. But as an addition to that, there's three areas of information that we need to analyze. What we know that we know, what we know that we don't know, which is easy to understand, and then we just learn how to learn it. And then what we don't know that we don't know. And that's where the majority of the information is. And what we usually do when we're trying to help a client is invest in their companies as well. The first thing we do is take a deep dive into the company, take a deep dive into the sector itself. We analyze the trends, the different threats that could be, and the opportunities this company may have. And we do it in a very deep way. That process takes between 2 and 3 months, only that process. But what comes out of it is a completely different perception of the value of the company. Having said that, during the past 10 years, many sectors have been disrupted, highly disrupted by technology. And that disruption is what led us to create a new division in our company, which is innovation. And we have a team specifically appointed to understand how innovation could impact the companies we invest in and the companies we help grow. This process, it's also quite interesting because, especially now, the COVID context we are living in is accelerating technologies much faster than they were before. We truly believe that there's going to be a completely new world after COVID in a positive way. There are some social dynamics that are changing, consumer habits, consumer behaviors. Some of them have already changed. So we're going to live through the largest need for reinvention. There's nothing that's going to be more aggressive in businesses than the need for reinvention, probably more than in the past 100 years since the Industrial Revolution. We had that challenge before COVID with technology, leaving a lot of jobs that need to be retrained. Now, post-COVID, it's even more intense. So most companies will have this strong need to reinvent themselves before going to market.
What's interesting is there's a huge market disruption that's happening every day because of the pandemic. And I know going into that, you and your team, you developed a proprietary process where you would look at companies and identify their strategic advantages and how you can help your clients get the highest value when they exit. So maybe we can tie the two together. What are some of the typical mistakes that you're seeing business owners make that would help them if they knew it ahead of time, they could work on that so that when they're ready for their exit, they're further ahead?
Yes, it's one that groups together many others, and that's the capacity to adapt to new changes. So capacity is key in this vision. There's nothing permanent other than constant change. Right now, changes are happening more and more rapidly. So companies have this great challenge to adapt and lead. But in order to adapt and lead, they need to learn how to adapt themselves before they can adapt the company. So it's a dual process that we run in parallel with a mentoring program that we put together with the client and working with themselves as well as the company.
In that mentoring program, what would you have them do differently?
Well, first, to analyze their paradigms, understand that we are slaves of our own habits, And all of our habits are loyal to our comfort zone. So that limits a lot of freedom of action and freedom of thought that we need to implement. And that drives a lot of creativity once we break those patterns. How to become free and be able to think way beyond our vision. The second is how to develop trust. Trust is the mother of all values. To have trust in what you're doing and understanding that trust and initiative comes together, we can measure risk and potential success from a completely different angle. So we apply all those formulas into the business and make it fit in order to make it aligned. I think that's a key word in this process, alignment between the shareholders' value, the company value, the market value, and the product itself. A product has to make sense to the consumer. A consumer is changing so fast. I read a research paper many years ago, I think it was probably 5-6 years ago, where it said that most consumer products in the market, I think they were about 80% of them, they never went through reinvention. They lost their purpose of their existence and are still in the market because of the push and pull marketing strategy, either by mortar retailers or by e-commerce. But there are few products that have been reinvented.
Rolando, it's interesting when you talk about loss of purpose. One of the things in the Deep Wealth experience that we focus a lot on, the business has to run without the business owner. And for better or for worse, many business owners say, well, why? I should be at the center of everything. I'm the best at what I do. I know more than anyone else in the company. So I think it'd be important for our listeners to hear from what you've seen from both the seller side and from the buyers who are coming in to buy the companies. Why do business owners not want to be running the company? Why should they get inside their mindset that the company has to run without them? From your experience and from your insights, what would you tell business owners?
I would say that it depends on their talents and capacities. Some of us have capacities to become entrepreneurs and to be good entrepreneurs, and some others have the capacity to be very good managers. Very few have the capacity to be both. I remember being the best business advice I've gotten in my years. I was very young, 27 years old. I was in the process of selling my first company, and I happened to be in a dinner with one of the most successful businessmen in Latin America. And I asked him a question and I said, I would love to learn from you what is the key factor to be very successful in business. And he said something that still resonates in my mind. He said, make sure that whoever you hire is by far more intelligent than you. So that gave me a lot of clarity and a lot of understanding on my limitations. Because when we are driven by our own success, we miss a lot of issues because our ego gets inflated that we are capable of doing a lot of things and doing more and more. And it's not about doing more. It's about doing it right at the right time, with the right energy, with the right team.
And so talk a little bit about that. So you have a founder of a company, starts the business, has a vision, has a problem that he or she is passionate to solve, becomes successful, has customers that are being helped. What advice do you have for that business owner now that they have a successful company? How can they start to withdraw themselves from that process? To go back to what you said, you can be a successful entrepreneur or a successful manager, but not both. Most business owners, they're entrepreneurs, they're creative, they're driven, they're change makers, they create market disruptions. How can they get back to the entrepreneurial state and away from the management state?
Get a very strong board of advisors. That's, for me, a key component. We have a very strong advisory team, and we always try to get the best of the best. We don't cut corners when we hire advisors, and only can afford to have the best of the best. Otherwise, the risk elevates too high.
For our listeners, how do they know who would make a good board of advisor? What qualities in a person should one be looking for in a board of advisor, and where would you find board members?
There are some companies that specializes in structuring boards. We do it out of necessity from our clients. The process that we use when aligning a board is make sure that we have identified clearly the needs of the vision that each advisor needs to have. And then we go out and trying to find the talent that fits that need.
And so once a business owner has a board of advisors set up, in your experience, Rolando, how often is the board meeting and what would be some of the issues that the board would be overseeing?
What I've seen most commonly is that the board of advisors meet every quarter, 4 times a year. They usually do a 2-day meeting. Now with COVID, we can do it online, of course, but it doesn't require more than a meeting per quarter because you're only discussing high-level issues, high-level needs, and high-level strategies. You don't go into the day-to-day management.
I'm curious, would there be one or two areas that companies need the most help in that you see time and time again? And what would those areas be?
I think the most challenging one is to try to change their paradigm. Everything else falls into place once we have achieved to change their paradigm. And they know their business very well. I'm very impressed where we invest in companies where we can have a carry on the delta that we help them grow. I've been very impressed on the knowledge that they have on their business. But I'm also surprised on when we run the process through the high-level team, all the value that we create in that process from a vision perspective. We untap a lot of opportunities by developing the process.
That's terrific. When you talk about the paradigm and you talk about the vision, a lot of people think that the value of a company, it's a simple formula in a spreadsheet, and that's it. I think if you're doing things right and when you go to market, it's how you position your company. It's the vision, it's the paradigm that you're portraying to the future buyer. It's the hope that you're able to give to the buyers of why you can help them solve their next problem. Some of the accounting people may disagree with what we're talking about here, but in your experience, is value simply a formula in a spreadsheet, or is there more to that?
It's much more than that. In a nutshell, the value of a company is just the capacity the company has to generate cash in the future. That's as a general formula. But this can be seen through many lenses. If you're a financial buyer where your interest is just to buy the company for as low as you can so you can resell it for as much as you can, then there's a formula. And you will discuss and fight about the formula. But if you look into the value that your company can provide to potential buyers out there, strategic buyers, and what do I mean by strategic? It's that it's much more than just what the company can be able to do on its own business model. Some companies are worth much more because of the platform they provide to potential buyers than the current cash flow that they have. This can multiply by many, many times the value of the company. And then you have a major transformation that some companies have the potential to do it, and is to transform the company from a classical model to a digital model. Digital companies, online companies, most valuations are measured on a multiple of revenue instead of a multiple of EBITDA. So if you can transform a company whose business model as is right now will be valued as a multiple of EBITDA, and then you go and benchmark what that multiple is in the market, and you transform it into a digital company that could justify the multiple of revenue formula, then you multiply by 10, 20, 30 times, sometimes 100 times the value of the company.
And so, Rolando, let's talk about that, because I think the timing for that is perfect right now. We've had a huge market disruption. Everything is up for grabs with the pandemic that's going on. Earlier, you mentioned that there's different types of buyers, and depending on the buyer, it's going to affect the kind of value that's there. But let's circle back to something that you're just saying right now. Because of the pandemic, online today is more important than it's ever been. And so what I'm hearing you say is that businesses that can get their service from in-person into the online environment, if they do it well enough, they can move from multiples based on the EBITDA to revenue, which is significantly higher. So why don't we talk a little bit about how does a company do that? Most business owners are thinking, I'm just trying to stay afloat, never mind going digital or going online. This also goes back to why it's important that the company runs without you so that you can have the vision and the time to go into new markets. But where would a business owner start today if they don't really have an online presence at all, or they just have a minor online presence? how could they start that process?
The main purpose is to transform the company from an organic growth model to an exponential growth model. And we know that exponentiality is what drives companies to be valued at multiples of revenue. And that's what makes it attractive for many buyers as well. Not only strategic, but also financials. Because some financials in this digital world can be very strategic. Going through that process is very important. I haven't seen one single company that is not using technology as a tool for growth.
What I think is interesting is because of the pandemic, what wasn't acceptable before is now not only acceptable, but people are expecting change. And so if business owners are able to go online and do things that they weren't doing before, helps with the market disruption. You had mentioned different kinds of buyers. For some business owners who are just beginning the process of selling their company, they may be asking, well, isn't there just one kind of buyer, just a company that wants to come in and buy my business? For someone who's just learning about mergers and acquisitions, who are these different types of buyers and what differentiates one buyer from another buyer?
That's a very, very good question, Jeffrey. We have two types of buyers, the financial buyers and strategic buyers. A financial buyer will try to buy your business for the least potential price. They take possession of the company, maybe readapt it, and then they try to reposition the company to strategic buyers. So what they bought from 5x, they are selling it for 20x in 3 years. What we do with our clients is do that process in a very transparent way. Transparency here is very important because when we are measuring the value of a company, we don't do as a company valuations on purpose. We have the complete financial team that could do it. But we don't do it because we truly believe it is a conflict of interest for us to do the valuation and then convince him that that's the value that we're going to take him to market. It's not right.
You've talked about the two kinds of buyers. You have your financial buyer, you have your strategic buyer. Let's talk about a company like yourself, Rolando, and what you do. I know when I was looking to sell my own company, there's just too many to choose from. And you start to ask the question, well, how do I really know who's the best? One tip that you gave, which is very interesting, and not a lot of investment bankers do this, you refuse to do your own valuation on a company, and instead you look for a third-party valuation to keep it independent at arm's length with you and your customers. That's important because it gives everyone a benchmark of what the company's truly worth, and that's not for your agenda or anyone else's agenda. It's for what's best for the company. What else would a business owner want to look for? And on the flip side, what should you be on the lookout for someone to not hire if you're seeing certain kinds of activities or characteristics?
I think it depends on the needs of each owner. Some owners are just looking for a quick and fast exit. They just want a transactional investment banker who may just position the company as fast as possible and just take it to market and sell it. But they will not be maximizing the price. It makes a lot of sense to take this deep dive and then decide. Stage one, let's take the deep dive together, run the process. And, some of them said, you know what? I don't want to sell it now. The growth that I perceive after this process, I want to leave it.
You talked about stage one of doing a deep dive and showing them where the value is and the clarity of the vision and what that looks like for them. When you've done that, what would be the next stage after that in your process?
Alignment of the perception of values. Because when you go to market, most potential buyers have a different perception of what the company could be worth to them. So aligning the perception of value and understanding how the buyers perceive the different values, one company could be a perfect fit for one sector that has a specific perception of value or to another sector that has a completely different one. We had cases where we invested in companies that during the process, it took us 3.5, 4 years to grow with them. When we go to market and we run the process, to have soft bids because we have so many interested buyers. And then we are surprised that the final buyer ends up paying 4 times what we had estimated at the beginning. And I remember one time I was in the dinner celebration of the new owner that had bought this company and asked him, how come you pay that much for this company? And he said, you know what, Rolando, I would have paid twice of what I paid because they have a specific permit to do some things across countries without paying taxes. So this allows me to have a platform that minimizes legally a lot of taxes. That we hadn't seen in the perception of values exercise we did. Otherwise, we would approach most multi-regional companies that would fight for this company.
Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. And it just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You just never know why a buyer sees value in a company. You should never assume, you can never guess. And so I'm interested to go back to your process. So you talked about stage one, you're doing a deep dive on the vision. Step two, it's the alignment for the perception of value. Is there a step three to your process?
Well, at the end of the step two, which is very important, is that we don't only want to reinvent the company for a better positioning. We want to strategically reinvent the company, which is different. We're putting the whole formula of strategy into the component of restructuring a company.
To strategically reinvent a company, can you give an example of what that means or what that would look like?
Yes, we put all the different sectors and how these companies within each different sector could be of value by reinventing themselves and how this company can help through the reinvention process. So we don't only work with the selling company where we have invested, but also we work very closely with the buyers and explain to them how they can, by using this reinvention, reinvent themselves and grow even further.
Rolando, what I think is key here for our listeners, and listeners, listen up because this is really important for you. You know, you think you know your business and you probably do, but you don't know what you don't know. And so here's a great example. Rolando comes in and he puts you through a proprietary process that's going to change your company. Maybe the core of what you do is the same, but your outreach to the market, the sectors that you're going to, the vision that you're communicating, that is likely going to change and change for the better. And one of the things, Rolando, that I hear time and time again, well, I can just sell my company on my own. I don't need any outside help. And what we're talking about right here is proof enough that, well, yeah, you probably could sell it on your own, but you're going to take a significant discount versus bringing somebody like yourself in who's going to just see blind spots that business owners don't see and clear that up and lead the way for higher value. Now, speaking of value, Rolando, one of the things that I know you do is you look at different kinds of business models and look to align that with what the company is doing and what makes most sense in the market. So what are some of the trends right now with business models?
I would advise them to take a close look at technology. Technology may help them tremendously. Technology is developing much faster than we think, that we can even imagine. I have in my desk, which I haven't been in 5 months due to the COVID quarantine, having my desk a sign that says, if it already works, it's already obsolete. So we have to develop a vision that is beyond our current understanding. This is a process that allows us to dream. And when we go into that process of trying to visualize what the consumer would love to have without them understanding what they need, which is the interesting part, then you can come up with ideas. And then you go out and the technology is already there to put it together. So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on right now in the world regarding technology. It's easy to structure and adapt processes and products with the technology.
And what's amazing with what you're talking about with the technology and the business models, ultimately that comes back to leadership and leadership of the business owner, leadership of the team. You have a lot to say on leadership and you've written a lot about leadership. Talk to us about your leadership mentoring program and what your takeaway is for business owners of what they should be thinking about as leaders within their company and their community.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Gladly. I think it's important that in order for us to help others, we need first to help ourselves. And that's a basic principle in life. Sometimes I make mistakes, but that's good. Everybody makes them. I don't judge or criticize mistakes. On the contrary, that's the only thing that makes us learn faster than anything else, as long as we see them as opportunities for growth. The program has 7 forces that we develop as human forces, as capacities that we can have as leaders. The first one is to make sure we acquire freedom. We need to be free of many things that were just sold to us. They were not our ideas because we went through an education process since we were born. It wasn't even an education process. It was an inductive process. Education comes from the Latin educere, which means to bring from the inside out. And we have not gone through that process. We were inducted, just the opposite, with information, life principles that we needed to follow. So when we start developing our curiosity on how life works, then we start to empower ourselves to think differently. We take a look at ourselves, and I have a game I always play with my son that I say, I catch myself. I catch myself constantly doing this. So we need to become aware of our own limitations and of our own habits so we can change them. And then the spectrum simply opens up into creativity and potential solutions. Then we have to develop trust. Is a key factor. And trust promotes a lot of economic development. When you trust someone, the transaction that you do with him, you'll do it 10 times faster than if you don't have that element of trust in place. We've seen economies that where their population has high levels of trust, the economic development grows 2-3 times faster than in other economies where culturally there's no trust or very little trust.
Trust is everything. And having been on both sides of the table, Rolando, perhaps you can emphasize to our listeners, if a buyer doesn't trust you as a seller, it's done. It's game over. You can have the best company in the world, but either the deal isn't going to happen or there's going to be a significant discount on the value because the trust isn't there. During the exit process, what should a seller be doing to create a sense of trust? You can trust me. I do what I say what I do. What would that look like?
Doing two things, basically. Number one, understanding their needs and getting to a very open and sincere conversation. What the buyer wants, what they need, what their interests are. That's number one. And number two is to be empathetic with them. And that's probably the most important one and the most powerful. We need to get into their shoes so we can understand them in a deeper way. And most times the mistake that we all do is try to get into their shoes without taking our own first. So we need to take off our shoes first before getting into theirs. That means having the liberty of changing the paradigm so you are open-minded enough to be in their shoes. So it's a collaborative process that goes through a very specific methodology until we reach on the end, which is the last one, forces respect.
Well, that is amazing. And before we talk about respect, just with the trust, I really like what you said about trust, of understanding their needs and being empathetic. At Deep Wealth, we call that tuning into a very specific radio station, WIIFM, the What's in It for Me radio station, but not from you as a seller, but what's in it for the buyer. If you can understand what your buyer needs, you can be empathetic to that, and you can also speak to that need in a way, like you said, Rolando, that builds that trust and can make all the difference. When you think about this, the leadership model that you just spoke about with the 7 attributes, I mean, yes, it applies to a business, but it also applies to us individually to make us a better person, a better leader, a better father, a better mother, a better member of the community. Rolando, as we begin to wrap things up here, I'm wondering, from all the things that you've seen, if you could take 2 or 3 best practices, pieces of advice that you would give to someone who's beginning the process of thinking to sell the business, what would that be for you?
First of all, before taking your business for sale, interview as many people as you can. Investment bankers, advisors that give you not only options, but visions on how to do the process. That's very important. There are transactional investment bankers. There are consulting companies that help position your company as well. Get as much advice as you can before you take it to market, and make sure that you make each and every one of them sign a non-disclosure agreement, because this should be confidential. When we take a company to the market, we never say it's for sale. This is key, because at the end, we don't know what's going to be the right formula for the seller. It could be a merge. Sometimes they ended up buying the buyer. So, because this is strategically exponential restructuring. So get as much advice and get into a process of taking this deep dive with somebody you trust and see all the options that you have.
It speaks to something that a lot of business owners believe, but for me, it's a myth. And that is an unsolicited offer. So someone comes to you, gives you an offer, you haven't prepared the company, maybe it's your competitor, and they want to buy you. A lot of business owners will say, terrific, look how much time I've saved, look how much money I've saved. I haven't prepared my company, I don't have to pay commissions or anything else. It's a lot of money, I'm just going to sell. And from what we've been speaking about, that's really not the way to go. It's the way to go if you want to have a lower value. If you want to leave a lot of money on the table, it's the way to go, but not if you want to maximize value. So when you've been out there and now you're interviewing as many people as you can in terms of advisors to help you with the exit process, once you've done that, what would be the other one or two things that you would advise for our listeners of what they should be thinking about when selling their company?
I'll try to understand what is going on in their sector, how this sector is being disrupted. Some entrepreneurs have not even seen, and it happened to me a few years ago. I had not seen a major disruption that was going in a business that I had. The sector itself globally disrupted and imploded. It didn't explode, it imploded. From global sales at that time on that sector, I think they were around $1.7 trillion to 150 million. So that's a massive implosion. Basically, we didn't see that. So it's important that you keep on trying to understand where the market is going. That's key.
Terrific advice. So just to recap here, everyone needs to work on him or herself just to be the best version, the best person that you can be. And that's going to certainly help your company on the exit. And then when you're going through the exit, Rolando, to what you're saying, speak to all the advisors, take a look at what's going on in your industry, any possible disruptions, and then prepare. So I'm wondering, Rolando, if somebody wants to find you, where could they find you online?
The name of the company is visagecapital.com. They can reach out through the email in the website, and we'll be more than happy to see how can we help them. We always help. Even if we don't get engaged, we always help them, either referring them to a company that we think is going to be a better fit than us, or if we can help them in the process, be just restructuring or reinvention, or putting up a strategy that makes sense for them, or taking to an exit, more than happy to help.
That's terrific to hear. And the one question that we like to ask every guest on our show is a little bit of a wide-ranging one. And Rolando, this could be from a personal perspective, it can be from a business perspective, it's whatever you choose. And the question is this: when you look back at all the things that you've learned over the years, if you could give one piece of advice for our listeners in any area, for anything, what would that piece of advice be for you?
Keep learning and have fun in the process. Lifelong learning is a key self-initiative that we all must adapt. I was speaking to a president of a university, a very well-known university, 2 weeks ago. And because of everything that's going on, he shared with me that they are considering a different model where instead of students paying a big lump of money at the front end when they go to college, not charging during the education, the 4 college years, and then just take a carry on their future income. I love the concept because that's truly alignment. They have completely alignment of interest. The university will always be there for you as a mentor, and you will always be in a process of constant learning.
That's amazing and terrific life advice that on both the personal side and the business side will serve everyone very well. Rolando, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to speak with us, and really appreciate both your insights and your wisdom that you've shared. Congratulations on your success to date, but I'm also going to wish you a congratulations on your future success because you're doing some terrific things and I'm very excited for you. So on that note, thank you so much for your time and the interview today.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thanks for what you're doing. I think you're helping a lot of people going through a successful process the right way.